All right. We are in the middle of a series called Social Distortion. And last week we talked a little bit about conflict resolution. Don't know if you were here, prompted a few questions. Um, you're laughing. This one probably is going to do the same. I want to tell you a story as we get started, but what we would like to get to today is talk about some of the things that divide us and keep us from developing the kind of culture that do I sound funny? Nope, just to me. Good. I'm glad I don't sound funny. All right. So back in 2012, anybody remember 2012? Okay. It was an election year. Do you remember that? I hate election years. I don't know why, I just do. But anyway, that year was again the election to change the future forever. It was the most important election in my lifetime. It was you fill in whatever blank you want. And I was working at a church in a suburb in Pennsylvania and got done preaching that day. And I was standing in the lobby agreeing with some people. And this person comes up to me and he says, I just have one question for you. And he kind of pointed his finger at me. And I'm like, oh, this is going to go great. And he said, can a Christian vote for Obama? And I chuckled, like I went, like, really? My chuckle did not prompt the response I expected because it wasn't reciprocated with, it was more reciprocated with an accusation. And the accusation it was very clear, very loud, then you're a liberal. And I was like, why are we having this conversation in the lobby of a church? And why are you making accusations? And I was a little agitated, would be the word. And I was trying hard to keep my composure and not say something I would regret later. I managed to do that. And the reason I'm sharing this story with you has nothing to do with politics. And you'll be, whew. Now that's the next series is on politics. This one is on how we create artificial disunity in the church. I did ask the gentleman to go home, read his Bible, and come back and show me where my political affiliation has anything to do with my alignment with Christ. You know what? He never came back to me. It's not in there. And so for fun this week, I had our social media platform, which is Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, if you're in the room. Send out some surveys. Did anybody participate in surveys? No. Oh, thanks, Rob. I did. Do we have a slide? You did? Thank you. I can't read that. I do. What's the first question? Oh, yeah. Diet Coke, Coke Zero. Who won? Of course it did. I voted for Coke Zero. What's the next one? I don't know why I can't read this. Oh, yes. This was disappointing. It is true that Twizzlers should win, but it should have won by a lot more than that. A lot more. And the people that put neither, shame on you. Jesus' birthday. This was my favorite one. Is it December 25th, a different day, or you're not sure? I think we all should have put not sure. Huh. Do we have any more? One more. How would Jesus vote? I threw that one in just for grins and giggles. And I think the vast majority of you who voted said he wouldn't vote at all. Are you sure? He wouldn't participate? He seems like a participator to me. Run away? Find somewhere else to live. Move to Canada. So I did this for fun, just to tell you how we go about making decisions. And there was another one about Fords and Chevys. Apparently, you all like Fords better than Chevys. But we create in our minds stories that help us to delineate as to who's in and who's out. I know those were very arbitrary and dumb, but we do it in ways that oftentimes are, I would say, silly. We create artificial barriers. We make decisions in ways that sometimes just don't make any sense about other humans. I can't hang out with somebody if he's he drinks Diet Coke and I drink Coke Zero. Right. Yeah, who does that? But who does the same thing when they say, well, he doesn't agree with me politically, so I don't want to have anything to do with him? So there's this story in Matthew 25, and I want to read it for you. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's epic. It's an epic story. You're going to know this story. Um, but I was always taught it wrong. And I kind of want to bring you into the story. And maybe you were, maybe you weren't, but I was. This story invoked great fear in me as a teenager. Um, Keith Green made it worse. Anybody in here who know who Keith Green is? All right, 5 of you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Um, and so I'm going to read the story, and then I'm going to just kind of tell you how I received it as a kid. Verse 31, Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. Okay, just picture the scene, man. The scene is God arrives, all the angels are with him, and he's sitting on the throne, and it is Judgment Day. How you feeling now? Excited, a little afraid. I'm feeling both of those things. When I was a teenager, I was feeling dread. Dread, if that's a feeling. And he says in verse 32, all the nations will be gathered before him. So I'm in company. And he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Do you know where this is going? You know where it's going? Everybody know where this is going? You sure you know where this is going? This is very important because you all assume you know where it's going. So did I when I first heard it and was taught it. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. You know where it goes, right? Because I prayed a prayer. Because I said the right thing and I believed the right thing. That's what it should say next. But it doesn't say that. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. There's a lot of confusion in this crowd. Not this crowd, but this crowd. Because then the righteous will answer him and say, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? Confusion. That's what you hear. And the king will reply, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Okay. First of all, This has been used for many, 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 many things, usually to scare me. But as I've read it and studied it and thought about it and contemplated it, this is Jesus speaking to his people, and he's standing in front of them or seated on his throne. And who's dividing the people up? Who knows who the sheep and the goats are? That's the first question. Jesus does. Did the crowd know whether they're sheep or goats? They sure try to figure it out. This has been part of my existence within the church. If we could just figure out who the sheep and goats are, this would be great. They don't even know that they're sheep or goats. Only one person knows, and he's sitting on the throne. And so much time and effort is being put into place to keep the goats out when you don't even know who the goats are. Crazy. That's what the guy was trying to tell me when he came up to me and said, "Can you be a Christian and vote for Obama?" He's trying to figure out who the goats are. He's trying to put a criteria in a place where only Jesus has got that prerogative. Only Jesus. Only Jesus. You don't get to decide that. He put the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. And at that point, who knew? Who knew? The other thing that's really curious about this is that it talks about nations and not individuals. All the nations will be gathered in front of him. All the nations? Can we choose which team we're on? That's not what this means. But we think in terms of our English language, we go, oh, okay, I'll probably be with a bunch of fill in the blank. It's ethnicity groups, usually, is what that word means, but it's groups. So, could there be groups of people that are sheep and goats rather than just individuals? That's provocative. But as us individual people, we often think just in terms of individual. We kind of ignore that it says the nations. He separates them out, sheep and goats. And then the king says to them, "Come, this is the thing that always puzzled me. The kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world." And he says, "Because when I was hungry," he said, he uses first person. He doesn't use somebody was hungry. He says, me, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, he's talking about himself. What does that mean that he's talking about himself? I always thought it meant that he was just identifying with the people on the margins, the people in need, the people. So my entrance into heaven predicated on me helping the poor or the people that were marginalized or whatever. It was often used as a way to guilt me into helping people that needed help. It was never intended to be that. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. And then the righteous will answer, man, I don't ever remember doing that for you. Makes sense? You remember doing that for Jesus? Here's the thing, the last phrase, verse 40, if you want to throw verse 40 up, and they give their objection. They say, truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. What is he talking about, brothers and sisters of mine? Fellow followers of Jesus. He's got family written all over this. But how do I know who the family is, right? How do I know which ones are the goats and which ones are the sheep? And how do we know how this works? And all of the questions is you don't. That's why you don't know if you're doing it for whoever, if you're doing it onto Jesus or just doing it onto humanity. And here's the kicker with all of this, it doesn't matter because we treat humans like humans because they are of the highest value to God. And what's of the highest value to our God is of the highest value to us. It seems to me how we treat the marginalized people in the world matters. But it also matters how we treat one another. That's a one another statement. It's a big one another statement. How we treat the other brothers, sisters that claim Jesus matters because it proclaims Jesus. He says, as you've done it unto me. What is the church called? It's called the body of Christ. What is it that he identifies with? His people, brothers and sisters, adopted children. We're family with Jesus. And he says, if you've done it unto each other, you've done it unto me. The inverse is true. That's the part that sucks. Is the inverse is true. As you've not done it unto one another, you've not done it unto him. And so for the church, this is the dilemma. And so we're still trying to figure out, like they were back then, how do we know which ones we actually have to do this with? And which ones can we exclude? Because I certainly don't want to do it for my enemies. I certainly don't want to do it for people who disagree with me about what car to buy, let alone what political party they're in, or fill in the blank. We create artificial barriers so that we don't have to feed them, clothe them. The one that I was a stranger and you invited me in, I was a stranger. This is, I, I am a introvert by nature. I have a hard time getting to know people. I'm an observer. Strangers for me are hard. There's my excuse. You made me this way. I don't have to be nice to strangers. It doesn't work that way. And so in Matthew 19, we don't have a passage for this, but this also just speaks to the person of Jesus and how he treated marginalized people. And it's littered. If you just read the Gospels, I could have read just sat up here and read the Gospels to you, and you go, oh yeah, right there, marginalized, lepers, sick, women, and here he says, then brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But this is the beauty. This is the disciples rebuke them. No little children. And Jesus said, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there. Children were but an annoyance. And so the question I'm kind of wrestling with, and I wrestle with this and try to identify it in myself. Where do I create these artificial barriers? Where do I create disunity in the body because of my pettiness? Because I also don't see people like I should see them. What if the best kind of unity requires diversity? Just sit in that one for just a second. What if, what if the best kind of unity requires diversity? Is it really a miracle when a bunch of people who all agree on everything sit in the same room and go, amen, that's right, brother, you preach it. And I just echo back whatever it is that you believe is true, and you walk away justified being isolated from everyone who disagrees with you? I have just created a crime. That's not the gospel that I understand, nor is it the gospel that Jesus preached. Diversity is beautiful when it's around the person of Jesus. I don't have to agree with you on everything in order to be in relationship with you and be unified with you. But if we require uniformity, that we agree on everything, we've created something that is totally different. And I would say it's not Christian. I know that's a bold statement. You can ask me a question in a few minutes. But I think uniformity is from the principalities of darkness because it requires you to stop being curious about other people and just assume. You ever been in a situation that situation that I shared off the top where this gentleman comes up to me and asks me the question? He wasn't being curious with me. He was trying to set the rules, the boundaries. Oh, can you be a Christian and vote for Obama? What I should have said is, can you be a Christian and be a bigger jerk? But I didn't say that. Don't I thought it. What I should ask is, can you be a Christian and sit at the table with people who disagree with you, who call themselves Christian, and be curious? Because I think Jesus would have been curious. I think Jesus asked questions. I would have loved to been at Zacchaeus' table when Jesus walks in and they all go, "Oh, this is going to be great." But I'll bet money that Jesus was curious because he walked away changed. Zacchaeus walked away changed. Not because Jesus accused him of things, because he was curious about who he was. That would have been so fun. And a short man climbing a tree, that's always good for a laugh. But what is the best kind of unity requires? There's only two people in the room that got that joke. Swing and a miss. And so I want to ask you a question this morning. What do you assume about people who you go to church with? I still have this happen to me when I fight as hard as I can when I'm out in public. I don't know if this is public or not, but to tell people I'm a pastor. Do you want to know why? They assume certain things. They step into that. Either they tell me their church history, which is great. Um, okay, heads up. You sit next to somebody on a plane and you find out they're a pastor. Do not tell them your church history. They don't care. And if they do care, run as fast as you can. But um, or they start thinking about what they've said up until that point. Did I swear while I was talking to you? Did I? So they're looking for something, their behavior, they check their behavior, they talk a little bit different, they treat me a little bit different. So I tell people I work in human resources because I do. I don't tell them I do a podcast because inevitably they say, well, what's the podcast about? Ah, dang it. So, and nobody wants to talk about human resources. It's beautiful. So there's a method to my madness in that regard. But there's an immediate assumption. There's immediately, oh, you're probably this political party, so I can talk to you about this. Or I assume that you don't watch Game of Thrones, so I can't talk about that. Or thank you, Lucius. There's a I know that laugh. So, but we make assumptions because we do. Do you make assumptions? And then when you say something and somebody disagrees with you, do you call into question their very faith? Ah, I'm not sure that guy was a Jesus follower. He flipped me off at the corner. Is that enough to deter you from Is that a goat? They use the F word, friend. There's kids in the room. There's, but oh, that's enough. They're out. What is it for you? See, Jesus extended himself across the board. Woman caught in adultery, invites her into sinning no more. He doesn't condemn her. She isn't void of being part. A leper in those days, he healed people that were marginalized and not really accepted. Sinners, I mean, come on. Zacchaeus, he wasn't just a sinner, he's a special one. So once we start sitting in the seat of the judge, once we start sitting in the seat of Jesus, oh, there's a goat. Well, that one's a sheep. You don't know. I don't know. And apparently, either do the sheep and the goats. There's a couple more verses I want to share with you, and they're found in one is found in Galatians 3:26 through 29. Mike referred to this back a few weeks, but so in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. Love that phrase. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. So, what is he breaking down here? All the reasons we divide ethnically, gender, slave or free, occupations, economic status. You should be able to sit across the table from somebody in different economic status, different ethnicities, different upbringings, different jobs, and treat them as brothers and sisters in Christ. I know nothing new today, nothing bold and off the charts other than unity. Good unity, the right kind of unity, is found in diversity, not in uniformity. That's what that verse is saying. The miracle is in the unity and diversity, not in uniformity. And then in Ephesians 2:14 through 22, it says this: For he himself is our peace, Jesus, who has made the two groups, Jew and Gentile, one, and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace. That's the miracle. His purpose, it couldn't be more clear anywhere in the Bible. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity, making peace between the Jews and the Gentiles. And in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility toward one another. He came and preached peace to you who were far away and peace to those who were near. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. We are one family. We are one new humanity. We are unified around the person of Christ and Christ alone. And we gather in this place because Jesus made that new humanity a reality. Not because we get along with one another through our own cultures, through our own political parties, through our own jobs, our economic status, whatever our ethnicity is, whatever it is, it all becomes secondary when we step step into a relationship with Jesus, and what is elevated is the one new humanity, because that, my friends, is the miracle of being unified in diversity, which proclaims to the world peace is possible because of Jesus. Crazy. Consequently, you and I are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone, the center. The very thing that this is built on is the person who came and died on a cross, rose from the dead, sits and separates the sheep from the goats. Whoever he is and however you picture him, he's the one that brings unity, and therefore he's the one that gets to choose. He's the one that gets to decide who the sheep and goats are. You don't. I don't. I don't want that job. Who wants that job? And so, for all the excuses I can come up with as to why I shouldn't be kind to someone or love someone or have empathy for someone, and all the reasons why I think I'm better or I think I'm worse, whatever they are, they all fail when we come into a relationship with Jesus, because it all goes away, because we're all equals. There's not Jew or Greek, Jew or Gentile. There's no slave or free. There is no male or female in that context. Sure, we all bring our individuality to it, but not so that we can decide who's in and who's out, and who's worth my time and who's not worth my time. Verse 21, in him the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. And so it brings new meaning to me when I read this verse and I understand when Jesus said in Matthew 25, as you've done it unto them, you've done it unto me. It's his building, us. And as I treat you, I treat him. So where God dwells, we find his people. I'm going to open it up here for questions before we go to communion. I know it's kind of abrupt, but I would land in such a strange place if I kept going. So, does this prompt any questions for you this morning about sheep, goats, and other things? It's really dark in here. Can you flip the lights up? Oh, we have one over here. Okay. It should be on.
Hello?
No.
Check.
Hello. Is it on?
Whoa. Hey, there's people in the room.
Nice.
Wow, that is...
Check. This one's working.
Go.
You want to start here?
Yeah, I got it on.
Hey, Tom.
Hello. So for me, this is very easy to.
Bring them up a little more. Sorry. Go ahead.
Gotta see me.
I got to be able to see. I don't care if they can see.
For me, this is really easy to understand at a theoretical level.
Yeah, isn't
like,
it though?
This is the ideal. Like, let's be diverse. Let's accept everybody, feed everybody, all that.
Yeah.
To me, it would seem that the great unifier would be, being in the family of Jesus. And yet, practically speaking, our experience is that the church does a very lousy job of unifying.
Yeah.
And so, thinking practically, we need community, and we need things that we relate with one another. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, well, we all believe in Jesus, so that could be the community. But that doesn't work. So how do we balance pursuing diversity and being open to accepting others with finding familiarity and community with maybe like-minded people or people who share interests or things like that? How do we do both?
How do you do both? I there's two sides to the same coin. There's a positive side to this, and there's a downside to this. Um, I would argue that the key to making it work in a diverse environment is being able to not step in knowing what you think you know. So be curious. Um, Raised in a very conservative home, was taught, this is me, was taught that liberals don't get it. Got to know some liberals, and I realized conservatives don't get it either. So there's um, a curiosity. I initially was like, why would I even bother to get to know a bunch of liberals, right? Because they are whatever, fill in the blank. Or why would I get to know a bunch of conservatives because of the way? So curiosity has to be a part of this, and also the realization is that it 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 doesn't matter the either the political affiliation or their ideology or whatever. If they claim following Jesus, I treat them in a particular way. And in that middle is the opportunity to find something that is far greater than just uniformity. Do I have friends that I totally align with on everything? I don't, because I'm weird, and I also prefer the conversation to be more diverse. I prefer that. And so what our preferences land on oftentimes is what we gravitate to. And when we do that, we often find ourselves excluding people because we've made a preference rather than a commitment to something bigger than that. Is it easy? No. Is it culturally hard? Yes. Is it all of those things that would preclude us from joining in? I would say no, because the invitation is to something much bigger than what my uniformity would draw me to.
So,
How do we practice this?
well,
We go to the table and we ask questions, and
yeah,
we've had a lot of diversity at the tables at our house.
yeah.
Ask questions and and don't judge. You don't get to sit in that seat. I don't get to sit in that seat. And I think that's part of what we have become so accustomed to is I'm gonna write you off because you're not like me. And you can do that. I just think it just kind of wrecks the whole idea.
With that being said, would you say maybe, does this make sense?
Sure.
That community has gravity to it that can hold groups of people together, but the call here isn't necessarily to dissolve that gravity, but it's more so to say you can recognize that, but gravity shouldn't put up walls.
Correct.
So it's not exclusionary,
It's not.
even though there can still be
Yeah.
cohesion.
The center is Jesus, right? So, and we often see Jesus from one angle. We come at it from this way, and whatever way we were raised, whatever way we were taught, and somebody else comes from this way, somebody else comes from this way. But we often think of it as two-dimensional. It's not. It is multidimensional. It is from every direction, 360-degree sphere. People are coming to Jesus from all around that. And we've decided, and this is the way I was raised, is my way is the right way. You have to believe this, say this, and do this, and you're in. What we're saying is that there's multiple ways to come to Jesus, and it's Jesus in the middle. And our diversity is from all of those directions, and we step into relationship. And what holds it together is not my ability to be like you. If that's what holds it together, we're screwed. But if what holds it together is we all believe and follow this one person in the middle, it works. It was a great question. I butchered it, but it was a great question. Go.
Okay. So the passage about the sheep and the
Keeping the
goats.
goats.
Yes. I can see myself as both, as
Sure.
a sheep or a goat, depending. So, what do we do with that in light of him saying,
Mhm.
"Enter in or depart from me"?
Right. I didn't get to this. It was a little later, so thank you. This is where I was going to lead us into communion with this, but it's the idea that our faith actually plays out in how we treat people. It's not it's not what we do that determines whether we're sheep or goats. It's how our faith plays itself out amongst us. And and what we find, and what when we're being discerning, even about ourselves or about others, and we ask the question of, boy, I wonder, and this is where I get caught, right? Am I in that goat camp or the sheep camp? What am I? You know, there is a faith component to this that changes my orientation towards, and it's evidenced in how I live my life. And the invitation of Jesus isn't like, perform these things and I'll let you in. It is, allow the heart overflowing into these arenas, and you will see the evidence of these things. And you won't even know. You won't even know you're doing it for me. You'll do it. You'll just do it. There's no scale. This is not do your good works and you will find your way into heaven. Now, and it's an identity thing. That's the other thing that I didn't get to. There's about 8 points I didn't get to, but there's an identity thing that oftentimes we get confused about, but he identifies them with an identity as sheep. But if we look around a room, like the sheep and the goats don't know they're sheep and goats. They just know that they are, right? And that's the beauty of sheep and goats. And it's not that one's more valuable than the other. It's just that one of them is a follower of Jesus, and it manifests itself in the way that he treats the brothers and sisters, or she treats the brothers and sisters. That's all.
Here you go, Kev. Straight ahead.
Straight.
No, right there. Nailed it.
Hey.
Hi, Kevin. I like to play through conversations in my head. So, like, I'm imagining talking to this brother that is like, can a Christian vote for Obama? And I feel like a lot of times in spaces like that, the person is like, they come into the seat of judge, and they're like, I can do this because I know what Jesus would say about this.
Right.
And I'm like playing through, like, that conversation.
They sit in the seat of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like they're like, yeah, I know because I read the Bible and I know what Jesus would say about X because of, all of these things. And so I'm like playing through that conversation, obviously not in a church sanctuary.
We can.
Well, no, like this is like my fictional conversation that I'm playing through in my head right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like trying to think about, like, how would I talk to someone that, like, comes with those ideas? Like, am I gonna, like, is it like a head conversation where I'm gonna point to, like, theology? Is it like a more heart conversation where I'm gonna, like, be like, so, like, where do you feel it in your body, dude?
Yeah. Okay. And my response, this is just what I would do. What I've learned over the years is I just ask questions. I just say, hey, why is that so important to you? Why do you care who they vote for? And then they go down a trail. You get some more questions, and eventually they go. And I said, how does this tie in with whether or not they believe in Jesus or not, or follow Jesus? I don't get it. Help me out, because I can go down the other path and say the same thing, right? So it's it's the selective nature by which we make judgments. It is you don't fit my litmus test. You don't fit this litmus test, and we create them in our minds. And if Obama's just an easy target, but we do it in much more subtle ways. That's the silliness behind the. What day was Jesus born? Oh, December 25th. Well, maybe not. Well, you can't really be a Christian if you don't believe it was December 25th. Or, I heard you were baptized. Were you baptized all the way under? The guy sitting next to you has been baptized 6 times. And 7. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Sam. I thought it was 6. 7 is the right number. And did you get baptized through sprinkling or some immersion?
Yeah.
All times. They didn't hold you under long enough, which is what my mom said several times to me. Like, we're going to take you back. They're going to hold you under longer. So but are you really a Christian if you were just sprinkled? Were you christened as a child? And we make up all of these things that divide us over what is ridiculous ideas. And somebody in the room's a Paedo Baptist, and they're going, I don't think that's ridiculous, but okay. And you can hold that to yourself and not impose it on me and still be a Jesus follower. And be curious. Well, why do you just believe in immersion? And why did Sam have to get baptized 7 times? And what is it about? And be curious. Just ask the questions. Because we're all coming at Jesus from our own tradition, our own angle, our own thing. Well, you can't really be a Christian unless you go down to the altar and you profess Jesus in this way. Well, I'm going down to an altar in front of a bunch of people. But I profess Jesus. I follow Jesus. Are you really a Christian? That's what we do. We make up our own little criterias by which we judge who's in, who's out. Stop. Just stop. It's not worth it. You don't know. You don't know. All the sheep and the goats are going to be standing there in front of that. You're going to be with them. And you might be with a bunch of Americans slowly sliding away.
Yeah, we got one over here.
Okay, and then I got to
On
stop.
the left. Okay.
Where are we?
On your left.
On my left. Hey,
Morning,
Will.
Kevin. I'm thinking about the conflict styles you were talking about last week.
Yeah, that's why I did that last week, so we could talk about conflicts.
But like, how do we lean into this and like overcome differences without just avoiding?
Yeah, I think that's a great question.
Good.
How much time do I have? But I think the answer to that question is continue to be curious, ask questions. Don't think you're right, because oftentimes my avoidance is I'm right, you're wrong, and I don't want to get in an argument with you. Well, it's not. It doesn't have to be an argument. It doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as, can you explain that better to me so I can understand how you got there? And 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 it does, if they're not diminishing the person of Christ and they're not taking away the center. They're not saying that Jesus didn't die on the cross. They're not saying he didn't rise from the dead. They're not diminishing the person of Christ and his ministry and what he's done and the infectious nature of said thing, who he is. I think we got to live with the differences.
Thanks.
Be curious. All right, let's cut that. You can bring the lights down if you want, because I don't know. I just kind of chewed in about 5 minutes longer than I was supposed to. That's for another day. But we're going to take communion together. If you're new with us, we have people stand and come up and we dip bread into juice and we take communion. I know I'm going to throw a curve at Tim for a moment. Will you do me a favor? I would love for us to take this together as a sign of unity today. So if you wouldn't mind, if you would come up, take communion, take a piece of bread, dip it in the juice, and take it back to your seat. Hold on to that thing for just a couple minutes. And in between a song, I'll come up and lead you through taking that together. If you want to share a prayer request, there's some stations around where there's paper. Also, a place to give in each of those spots. But do that for me. I think we would have a unifying moment. Let's do that. Thanks, Tim.